when we go out as a family, or even especially when I go out with just the kids, we get asked on a very regular basis if our kids are adopted. Now, I know that for some people it's a little confusing because Jax is white and the other kids are not. But I actually, we'll talk about that, of course. But the thing that I think is the craziest for me is whenever I bring it up and I'll say hey, it's not necessarily appropriate to ask that, I get so much pushback from white people because their biggest thing is that they're like, well, I'm just curious. And I get I like getting to know other family dynamics, or I'm really curious about where people are from and their cultures and their ethnicities. And they genuinely do not think that asking someone if they adopted their children is a harmful question. And that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I can kind of see, hey, this ain't all that harmful idea if you don't calculate one thing. And the one thing that you got to calculate is kind of major, right? How often the kids hear that question.
Sure. And that was my very first thing is that's the first thing that you need to understand is that you are not the only person that has asked that question.
Not this week.
Yeah, not even this week. Maybe not even today if we're out and about for a long period of time. And so when you take into consideration how often our children are hearing people ask if they are adopted, you really have to you get to a point where you're how does that impact a child to hear? Because the truth is that you are not asking the white lady in the aisle with 3 white kids if her kids are adopted, and maybe they are. That's the hard nitty gritty truth of asking if someone's children are adopted is you are saying to them, you don't match your child, and for that feels unnatural to me.
And I want to figure out why.
I need to understand why it needs to make sense. And so you're essentially and I've had people say, in situations like this, it made me feel like I needed to justify my existence in the same space as other people.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can speak on that. Even just, have you felt that way just being Black, especially here in Utah where it's...
Oh, yeah. So growing up, and I used to always figure out, why my parents get so mad when people ask this question. But, we'd be anywhere we would go, right? We are in Utah, and it's white in Utah, guys. It is very white, super white, ultra white, all right? And anywhere we went, people would ask, hey, where are you guys from? And my mom used to get heated on that question. And for me, I was like, I don't really know why this is a big deal.
Yeah.
But my mom used to always take it as a signal that, and quite frankly,
it is.
It was a signal that we didn't belong there.
It is. And that's the truth is that you're not, I am white, right? And I grew up here. I grew up with a white dad, white brothers, white mom, white sister. I have never been asked where I'm from living in Utah, because unless somebody's trying to connect with me and we're oh, so where do you guys live? You're making casual conversation at an event, but no one has ever, and I repeat ever, just walked up to me in a gas station and said, where are you from?
Now, this used to happen literally every single time we went out. Every single time. If we were getting groceries, if we were at McDonald's, if my parents were at parent-teacher conference, where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? And it would be some people that heard the accent, because my mom's got an accent.
Uh-huh. And so does your dad.
And so does my dad. But a lot of times it was yo, where did you even come from? Come around an aisle and boom, they're there. Hey, where are you from? And it's whoa, okay. And maybe my biggest thing is I think that I'm numb to the fact that I didn't belong. I think I grew up just understanding that was the case, and therefore it didn't bother me. But my mom was not. She used to get super hot about that because it was you're not asking any other follow-up questions.
You're not asking my name.
You're not
asking my kids' names. You're not asking.
You just want to go and say, hey, we just met a lady from Haiti, and that's it.
And not even that. In a lot of situations,
I saw a lady from Haiti.
And not even for me, it's I saw a Black lady.
Yeah.
And that was the indicator to them that they needed to ask the question. They didn't think to themselves I wonder where because again, I don't know. It's very unsettling for me because really what it says is like, it is an underlying racist belief system. Like it's a natural, or it's like a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a subconscious segregation in your own mind where you are like, this is a white owned space. You still believe that. Like, this is white. It's naturally white. It's always white. So if you aren't white here, I'm not going to ask you your name. My goal isn't to try to get to know you. I don't care anything else. I just want to know how you're Black and how you came to be in this space. And I have never understood that concept until now, obviously.
I think recently, one time we had a conversation, I don't want to say it's like 2 or 3 years ago, and you might remember this, but you were like, what do you think when people ask you where you're from? And I told you, well, if someone asks me where I'm from within the first like conversation that we ever have, I've already written them off as a human being. And I like...
Well, I think that you said like it wasn't like the first conversation. It was like, if one of the very first and only things that someone asks me is where I'm from, like, it's over.
Like, that's it. That's all. Like, I didn't even realize... I won't say I writ you off as a human being, but like, we ain't having no friendship, and I already know that, and I've already experienced that it's never going to happen, and I don't really care. So I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to keep it moving. Like, so I don't have any super close relationships where that started. And I think in my head, I don't know that was like a proactive thing that came to me, right? But I think in my head, I realized, oh, okay, this is a surefire sign that I probably don't even like this person. Like, and maybe it's an assumption that I've jumped off to. Sure. And I could be wrong, but
I'm sure that there are certain people that could potentially have been great relationships, but if history tells you that it's not...
Over and over again, and I've literally been like, oh yeah, no, I don't... Yeah, I'm going to answer the question. We're going to keep it moving. We're not going to be friends. It is okay, and I'm not mad about it. And I remember when you were like, really?
It felt like, extreme to me at that time. Genuinely, it felt really extreme to me at that time because I was like, okay, but like, again, like, I'm white, right? And like, we can all see that. We all know that. And I think that sometimes I see some of these missteps as things that I totally would have done myself. And so I see some of these like repetitive questions that people ask all the time, regularly, that I wouldn't have thought about that. I could just totally see myself being that like very flippant person that's like, oh my gosh, so where are you from? Okay, actually not that one. I don't see that being
not right off the bat. You wouldn't?
No. But I'm just saying, like, there are certain things that I empathize a little bit because I'm like, I could maybe see myself saying or doing something that is not necessarily like the best, right? And so in that situation, it felt very extreme to me for you to say like, actually, I would just write them off. Like, that's not something that I would, but like, I can see it now as I've sat and thought about it. And as I've seen the impact that it's had on our kids when people are repetitively asking if they're adopted, I can totally see it. Because the reality is, and if we go back to the kids and the adoption situation, the truth of that is the interaction goes this way. There's two sides of this interaction. The person that asked and then us. And the person that asked, from their perspective, comes in. They say, oh my gosh, are your kids adopted? And I say, no, their dad's Black. They're half Haitian. They say, and this was before, now I am very openly like, that's not an appropriate question. But I give you the information you're looking for, and they say, oh my gosh, they are so beautiful. Now, they leave that interaction. They go through a Taco Bell drive-through. Now they're thinking about what they're going to get. They literally never think about this interaction ever again. Now, the flip side of that is us, right? Where we are, somebody comes up, asks that question, they leave. My children are then like, why do people ask that all the time?
Yep.
And at one point, Riker was like, am I adopted? And I was like, no. And he was like, are you lying? Because everybody is asking if I'm adopted. Like, are you?
He's like, there's a lot of evidence that might suggest
that I actually am adopted. Yes, he truly thought that we were just being dishonest with him and that we just didn't want to tell him the truth.
Why would everybody ask?
Like something, he like literally felt like there was this glaring, like something that proved that he was adopted. Otherwise, people wouldn't have asked that question. And so now this very repetitive question that you gained nothing from. You don't know anything about us. You don't know our names. You don't know how old my kids are. You don't know where we live, what we do for fun. We're probably never going to interact again. But you got this random piece of information that absolutely did nothing for you. And now you just get to go about your day. But on the flip side of it, it's now actually making my children question their belonging to our own family.
Yeah.
And like, it is causing them to believe. There was another time that Riker said, Mom, is Dad supposed to marry a black lady? Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, no. Why? Where is this coming from? And he was like, well, I just feel like people always ask us, like, if I'm adopted. And so then in his mind, and he's 9, he's probably our most attentive to things like this. But it's because he has OCD and he really, like, words really matter for him. Mm-hmm. But I remember him, like, understanding that concept. Like, a black mom and a black dad, nobody's going to ask them if their children are adopted. A white mom and a white dad, nobody is asking them if their children are adopted, even if they are. It's literally only when your children don't necessarily match you that people feel, for whatever reason, comfortable asking.
I'm with you there, right? Because they're only going to ask very, very specifically if it doesn't match up, right? And Riker's been able to kind of feel that and sense that. And the funny thing is like, this is not a knock on people who have adopted kids in any way, shape, or form. And quite frankly, it's just as harmful if the answer is yes, too.
I had somebody comment that. I had someone comment and say, I have, X amount of children, and they are different races and ethnicities, and people ask me, and she was like, my kids do not need to be reminded
that their parents,
that they are adopted, that their parents, for whatever reason,
found it necessary
to put them up for adoption, right? Like, they don't need that. And it is disruptive to our family dynamic. And I think that is actually the root of the problem, is that I always say, like, this is one of those curiosities that just gets to stay curious. Like, you just get to stay curious because
unless you know what? Yes, you get to stay curious unless we're homies.
Yes. I mean, but if we are...
But even if we are, friends, it'll come across eventually.
You just naturally came across that information.
Yeah.
Like, if we are now friends, it's going to come up in conversation. Like, actually, we were out with our friends at dinner. And one of them, like, we were just talking. We've been friends with them for years.
Yep.
And we were just talking, and it was like, yeah, one of our children was adopted. We ended up flying to California.
They told us the whole story, and we loved it.
It was such a special story. But it's never come up in years because it just has not been a part. We knew that their children were adopted, but we didn't know their adoption story. And we've never felt the need to ask because it doesn't matter. And I think that that's the thing, is that, like, if you actually know someone, it's just going to come up.
And that's exactly it. Like, for me, especially when people are like, well, where are you from? If you have to ask, you don't need to know, honestly.
Right.
Like, I can look at all of my best friends. Most of them, I would assume. Actually, I'm trying to think of anybody that wouldn't know that I'm Haitian. Like, it comes across in our conversations. It's a real part of my life, right?
Or food.
Yes, right?
Like,
I'm not hiding it. I'm not any way trying to duck that. I'm so proud to be a Haitian, right?
Well, and also, like, if let's say that we're friends for months, like, we've been hanging out, we've gone out to dinner.
You're coming to my house, probably eating some Haitian food or something.
Yeah, I mean, not at our house because
not necessarily
they don't follow
our
a recipe,
house, but
you know what I'm saying. But I mean, let's be so honest though. Like, let's say we go out to dinner with another couple, and it goes really well. So we go out a second time, and we're just eating dinner, and it's like, hey, so where's your family from? That is a very different conversation because at this point, you are now, you know their name, you know that you like each other, you know that you like spending your time together because you have now chosen to go out on another date. Now it is actually a part of a conversation.
Yep.
And that's the difference is this part of a conversation where you are truly digging to, like, get to know me?
And find common ground and understand?
Correct. Or is that the only information that you're going to get from me before you check out with your Powerade and then, like, never see me again? Yep. That's a very different conversation.
It is.